The gentleman from South Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Department of Justice, Mr. Chairman, is not just another agency within the federal government. The Department of Justice is responsible for safeguarding the fundamental foundation of this republic, which is respect for the rule of law. The department is symbolized, Mr. Chairman, by nothing more than a blindfolded woman holding a set of scales and a sword. She doesn't care about political agendas. She doesn't care about whether her decisions help or hurt people's reelection bids. She doesn't care about race, gender, socioeconomic status, just the equal application of the law so all citizens can have confidence in the decisions that she makes. So it is against that backdrop, Mr. Chairman, that we look at the facts surrounding this investigation. Fast and Furious was fundamentally flawed in its conception, flawed in its execution, and flawed in its explanation afterward. And this is not, Mr. Chairman, as was initially the administration mantra, an Arizona investigation. Senior level officials within the Department of Justice in Washington knew about Fast and Furious well before Special Agent Brian Terry was murdered. Senior level DOJ officials were briefed. They discussed press conference opportunities. They discussed the unsealing of indictments. They traded emails about the status of the case. They approved wiretap applications, and most significantly, Mr. Chairman, they actively discussed the tactic of gun walking well in advance of Special Agent Brian Terry's murder and well in advance of a demonstrably false letter being written to a committee of Congress that was calculated to deceive and mislead. And here's the proof. Here, Mr. Chairman, is the proof that Department of Justice in Washington, not Arizona, in Washington, knew about the tactic of gun walking well before Brian Terry was murdered. So we have a fundamentally flawed federal investigation. We have a dead Border Patrol agent. We have hundreds of dead Mexican citizens, thousands of weapons with America's fingerprints on both sides of the border unaccounted for, and a demonstrably false letter being written to a committee of Congress, and yet we're being asked for more time. Please wait. Give it more time. It's been over a year, Mr. Chairman. If Congress has time to look into Major League Baseball, the BCS, and invite Stephen Colbert to come to a committee hearing, surely to goodness we have time to get answers on a fundamentally flawed, lethal investigation like Fast and Furious. And thus we have, Mr. Chairman. We embarked on an investigation to get answers to some pretty fundamental questions that I still cannot answer. When I'm asked back in South Carolina, who within Maine Justice approved this investigation, I can't give them an answer. When I'm asked who knew about gun walking and did nothing to stop it, I can give them this, but this is part of the answer because it's part of the documents. How did the demonstrably false letter get written on Department of Justice letterhead and delivered to a United States senator? I can't tell you how that letter got drafted. Why was it withdrawn after 10 months? Why did it take 10 months to withdraw the letter? Why was the criminal chief, to my friend Pat Meehan's point, why was the criminal chief of the Department of Justice in Mexico advocating for gun walking on exactly the same day that this demonstrably false letter was delivered to a committee of Congress? Can anyone answer that question? Can you tell me why Lanny Brewer was in Mexico advocating for a tactic that we all acknowledge is flawed on the very same day the Department of Justice was denying the tactic to Senator Chuck Grassley? Not only does Congress have a right to ask these questions, we have a fundamental duty to ask these questions. Our fellow citizens, the ones we're supposed to work for, when they get a jury summons, do you think they have a choice on whether or not to comply? When they get a subpoena from a law enforcement agency, do you think our fellow citizens get to offer an extraordinary accommodation in lieu of providing the documents? Either Congress has the authority to send a subpoena and require full compliance, or what we have been doing for the past 12 months is a fool's errand. And we never should have discussed contempt of Congress. Either we have the rights of the documents and we should get all of them, or we have no business here. And with respect to executive privilege, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to resist the temptation to contrast Senator Obama's position on executive privilege with President Obama's position on executive privilege, but I would just note the juxtaposition is stark. If he was not part of the drafting of the February 4th letter, if he did not know about Fast and Furious before Brian Terry was murdered, if he did not approve of the wiretap applications, then what in the world is he asserting executive privilege for? He's either part of it or he's not. If he's part of it, then we've had a series of witnesses that have misled this committee. And if he's not part of it, then he's got no business asserting executive privilege, and I would yield back. Mr. Chairman, I would just simply say this. There's been a lot of discussion this morning about wide receiver, about previous administrations. Mr. Chairman, let me be very clear. Bring them all. Bring everybody before this committee. Anyone who has information about gun walking, bring the information before the committee, because gun walking is wrong no matter what administration does it. So bring the Republicans and bring the Democrats and bring the Bull Moose Party and bring the Whigs. Bring them all. But that does not mitigate this Attorney General's responsibility to comply with a subpoena from Congress. Those are two separate issues, Mr. Chairman. What happened? Let's get all the information. To all of our colleagues who want to blame the Bush administration for everything that has gone wrong in this country, give them their day. But that does not mitigate this Attorney General's responsibility to comply with the law. And I'll say this in conclusion, Mr. Chairman. Like my friend Pat Meehan from Pennsylvania, as a former prosecutor, this is a sad day. For someone who worked for the Department of Justice, I hasten to add, in a Democrat administration, this is a sad day, but it is a necessary day. The notion that you can withhold information and documents from Congress, no matter whether you're the party in power or not in power, is wrong. Respect for the rule of law must mean something irrespective of the vicissitudes of political cycles. I thank my friend from Florida, and I yield back.